goes into that. It's not just them. There's higher realm beings that are involved with it. And it's not that difficult to go out and receive activations from masters, and it doesn't matter how long ago. So the first time here, I would call Uri here one of the masters of the room. And one of the things that is done is that we ask everyone to put whatever positive intentions you can into it and whatever blessings of healing you can into it. So you all have a chance to pitch in, and there's automatically programming with, I call it antiviral, that would automatically negate, neutralize, eliminate anything that doesn't serve the greater good of all people who are participating in this. It's there's a lot of scripting. I started with knowing what every word. You all have a chance to pick. No problem. So I started out as a scribe for the subconscious programming for the human hardware. I started out knowing with what every single word was, and the base programming I have scripted and I have in audios. I've been doing this kind of work for a long time. And every word very carefully for empowerment. When you're involved with being able to do data transfers, you can do massive amount of conscious level data spiritually and subconsciously within just a moment. Within even a split second, you can transfer 2 hours with just no problem. That's easy. So how many of you like things that are just easy? So my middle name, Ezra, I go by nickname Ez, and it's just easy. So I'm glad that you can laugh. No, not everyone can call me Dr. Easy though, okay? But if you laugh like that, you can do it all the time. I have friends that do. It's just try not to wear it out. But anyway, I like to share that some of the most powerful things are the most subtle and effortless principles. And Buddha, I'm talking about laws of empowerment also tonight, which is something that I was also introducing the first time I spoke here. And all Buddha left behind was a footprint. He made it a point not to have any idol worship, statue worship. There was none. He left just only one thing physically, his footprint, and it contained the symbols for the principles that he wanted people to understand. And really the principles are what we're here learning. It's principles of nature that one of the most oldest teachings that I could find. I like what you said about your experience. That's what you know. Really, I've looked back as far as I can, and the oldest teaching that I could really find has been put the principles in action and get the fruit. Science says put the laws in action and measure the results. Einstein said the intuitive mind is a sacred gift. The rational mind, a faithful servant. And we've created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. If that was true when Einstein said it, how true is it today? You know, Christ also, his version, the best example that he gave in any one moment, in any one evening, was the Sermon on the Mount, which contains the Beatitudes. And that was his greatest example of his version of the laws of empowerment. The Matthew version in verse 19 says, if any man doesn't live by even the least of these things, and teaches other men it's okay not to live by even the least of these things, he shall be named the least in the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth them shall be great. That turns most Christianity right upside down on top of its head, like a lot of things that Christ actually said that aren't really being taught over the pulpit of most, dominant Christian churches. It's just not. So, what was he talking about? The least. Well, from my experience, people say keep it simple. Stupid, like the KISS method. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Have you heard that? It's interesting because I like to start with simplicity, but then I like to pull people right out of their comfort zone by actually helping them expand their level of intelligence. And when we do that, they never can go back to what they were. It's out of their comfort zone. And from my experiences, if all we do is keep it simple, we're also keeping them stupid. So I hope you bear with me, and I'm going to do my best to keep it simple with you. And at the same time, I'm going to give you a lot of homework. And I hope that we're able to help each one of you expand a little bit better of your vision and understanding. It takes love and understanding to really help people grow in a positive way. We've had a lot of challenges, and if we could have created world peace, we probably would have done it. Everyone's been wishing and hoping for it for how many lifetimes, how many generations, thousands of years have gone by. And yet, we still haven't achieved enough love and understanding, apparently. But with enough love and understanding, with the right understanding, knowledge, the right education, I think we can all do it. Nikola Tesla, which, the car was named after, the inventor of alternating current, who was ready to give us free energy in his lifetime, he said, with all the opposition that he received from the man who is promoting direct current, Thomas Edison, who didn't discover it, he paid people, he bought people's research, and took a little bit too much credit here and there. But, Nikola Tesla said, if the genius of invention were to reveal tomorrow the secret of immortality, of eternal beauty and youth, for which all humanity is aching, the same inexorable agents which prevent a mass from suddenly changing its velocity would likewise prevent the new knowledge until time gradually modifies human thought. Now that's a big, long quote. I thought a lot about that, and I realized time is not exactly what modifies human thought, although it may take time. But I put a lot of focus on exactly how can we really modify human thought. Here's something that I'd like you to think about. Every word in every language, if it has the same definitions, then it also has the same energy signatures. That the intelligence and energy are inseparable. The knowledge and power, clarity and charity, love and light. How many of you have heard with love and light? They're all the same. From what my experience is, you can't have one without the other. That faith is the intelligence of love. And what is the intelligence of the opposite of love? Fear. So there's a program that I spent many years scripting that I've produced. It's one that I thought I would never do. Out of all the things that I was hoping to be here for when I was younger, didn't all turn out the way I planned. I kept thanking my angels for my team of light for certain categories of information when it came to the how to create heaven on earth, that was the area of interest that was my father's. It was the area that he had as his personal interests. He was gathering lots of information and was sharing it with me, and he was a Nobel Prize nominee, discovered the engine of the cells, the sodium-potassium pump. He's the one who named it that. He, with his physics background, wrote the formulas for what shuts it off and how to turn it back on. And they're the basic formula for life and the basic formula for death. And then he was shown how to add a basic chart connecting our lifestyle to that. Everything that hinged off of love, faith being the intelligence of love. It teaches us how to think. The heart is where it really does start. But the head can't live without the heart, and vice versa. They can't live without each other. So we need to stop thinking of things as just the heart and be thinking of things in a more integrated way. Because if we really love, if we really care, here's another example. How can we have peace unless we're friends? It's not enough just not to be enemies. With all the gangs and rivalries and countries that have been at war, you know, people get the idea, well, let's just not be enemies. They've tried that before. When are we going to finally get to the point where we realize in order to have peace that we need to focus on being extraordinary friends? It's a totally different paradigm than where most people are. It's like their definition of health. They think health is just not being sick. But the other paradigm that I'd like to share is to be extraordinarily healthy, to have your focus so high you're really reaching for immortality. And what that's about. The cell is created to be immortal. If our human cells were ever meant to stop reproducing, the human race would have been dead a long time ago. Just think about it. From that perspective, we're all duplications of God and Goddess as well. So what does that do for people's self-image? Even Christ said it in John chapter 10, verse 34. Is it not written in your law, I said, ye are gods? Well, people were picking up stones to stone him for blasphemy. There's a lot of cool things that he was able to share like that. And he's quoting, that was also said in the Old Testament. There's an actual scripture. But, so, I want to talk about a little thing now called cognitive dissonance. How many of you are very familiar with cognitive dissonance? Raise your hand. How many of you have learned to embrace it and listen to the pain wherever it shows up in your life? Keep your hand raised. Cognitive dissonance. You know, it's a good thing to talk about with what's happening in the world right now, I think. Because if you take it, if you really understand it, if you know how to plug it into, if you just plug it into the basic personal development models, like the one Ayn Rand developed, who was a Russian Jew, came over and was warning people about what was going to happen in this country, warning them about their socialism and where she came from and what she could see happening with our politics. And she wrote Atlas Shrugged. There's a few movies about it that her followers have produced. Well, Franklin Covey adopted the same model, changed the names of the principles, but the principles it's exactly the same model. And again, if you take cognitive dissonance and plug it into that basic personal development model, you start getting a grand integration happening. And you don't have to use the exact same names. It's about understanding how principles work. Cognitive dissonance is a timeless principle that you can see popping up even when Christ said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He understood cognitive dissonance. when we're faced with our issues, we have two options: change our behavior or forget it. And when it's an uncomfortable topic for somebody or issue that's being brought up, most people let go of whatever's easier for them. And we change our belief system based on what we do more than just about anything. And this is something that is absolutely true, but it's not something that's very well understood. Little commitments lead to big commitments. Wear a mask. Take a jab and you won't have to wear a mask. Now you have to wear a mask again even though you took a jab and we needed you to take some more jabs. Well, it's very dangerous, that little mask. A little thing like that. Things start out very subtle before they turn out to be an iron, huge chain binding you. It's understanding how little commitments lead to big commitments. It's a basic tenet of hypnosis. There's a man named Marshall Silver. He's had the world's greatest hypnotist show in Las Vegas for many years. And he's teaching the truth about things. He's one of the people who does his best to walk his talk. And he says education, training, and hypnosis are all the same thing. And I've met people who say they can't be hypnotized. And even that is hypnosis. All of it. So you can use that for manipulating people. We know plenty of people who are doing that right now, like a big global psyop. And you can also use it for empowerment. So the laws of empowerment is the name of a website, and if you don't spell it right, you won't get there. But if you do, you will see what I've been able to gather as far as a grand integration of truth. And it gets into every area of our life. How many of you know Dr. Shiva talking about systems, systems, systems? The reason why I mentioned it is because it's true. Our life is made up of systems. The whole tree of life is systems. All of its branches are systems. And all of those systems have a certain amount of laws, each one of them. When we're in alignment with those, we get the fruit of the tree of life of that part of our life. And this is a bit more advanced than what my father mentioned with his chart. You can get the basics of that in a zero disease class that normally costs 20 or 30 bucks from my events site, but you can get it for free at thelawsofempowerment.com. It's about over 40 years of polishing the script on that. So you can get the basics of what we're actually growing on from that, because the more you understand the life and death process of the cells and how all these principles are tied into it, the easier it is to integrate more information like that. It's a really strong, powerful foundation to grow from when you're standing on the shoulders of geniuses who figured that out already out of their lifetime of work, of what they were studying. And everything is interconnected. All those branches, they're all interconnected. And we're going to be talking about some master keys to entire branches of our tree of life that you probably have not heard of, that we've really cracked the code for. They're keys of the priestess and priesthood of the whole. What is that? The word doctrine means teachings, and the word doctor, from its Latin origin, docere, means to teach or teacher. Hippocrates, who we can credit for the Hippocratic oath that all medical doctors take today, above all else, first do no harm, is part of that. He also said he didn't consider a doctor to be a doctor unless they studied astrology. Well, I don't consider a doctor to be a doctor unless they're a teacher. And I don't care how many plaques they have on their wall that don't actually, in and of themselves, do anything to actually heal anyone. The word doctor means to teach or teacher. There's no license required to teach. You know, you need a license if you're doing anything that has the potential to hurt someone, evidently. It's like a license to kill. Well, if you're not doing anything that has the potential to hurt anyone, there's no and no one else owns that. Also, you have to have a license, you have to own the thing that's being licensed. So the first marriage license was for some slaves. Prior to that, there was a certification. There was a acknowledgement, basically, acknowledgement that it was a valid transaction that actually happened with witnesses. And the marriage certificate was what we had prior to the licensing. And the licenses there's a lot of other rules they try and throw into the legal system with that to tear the family apart. Well, I'm going to, we're about 26 minutes into this. And before I get too far into what's happening politically with the government, with all this other stuff, let's give you some special keys that we've talked about. One, prayer. We're going to do an instant mass healing demonstration activation. I'd like you to put as much positive intention as you can for healing of all kinds. And this last, over a year of lockdowns that I was in Maui, I swam with the dolphins a lot. And one of the times before I got in the water, I knew I was going to try something new this time. Well, there was about pods the size of 40 or 50 dolphins at a time. And I did an activation for them and then asked for their permission to share an activation with me that I could also integrate with these activations. So you're also going to get the dolphin activation that I got within 10 seconds. They were in my head giving me the codes. So we're not going to give it to you audibly. Like I could actually hear them inside my head, in the center of my brain, like their astral body came inside of me and started making the sounds and giving me the codes of what I'd asked for, permission for. So they're planetary healers. Beautiful, beautiful. So this isn't going to include that. It's also going to include the last one that we did, and all the ones between then and now. And the one that I did right before, as soon as I said, as soon as 2020 hit, I started doing this. And there was an event in Temecula, not far from here, the AXP 2020 event. That was the first one. So we're going to include all the ones that we've been doing since 2020 started. And from then till now, and all the people that have been involved with that, and all of the greater things that we can add to that here with those of us that are here tonight. So some of the things that you'll see happen with some of the basic scripts, and there's a basic audio series called Discover Your Power Plants, the series, that was the closest that I was sharing as far as on a conscious level what I was doing with instant mass healings. And it's 2 hours in audio that you can go listen to, that's all scripted. And the most important part of it is turning on our endocrine glands that they call chakras in India, 7 houses in China. All masters around the world have had a way of turning them on, mostly through prayer. And when you're using that master key of prayer to do it with the power of the word the right way, it turns on the energy that our body produces. Mostly it's coming from these endocrine glands that they call chakras in India, the 7 houses in China. We have these power plants in our body. Thus the audio title, Discover Your Power Plants, that create a lot of energy. And in China, they look at them like 7 glasses of water connected with a straw, all on a level platform. If they're all connected with a straw where the water can flow from one to the other freely, if any one of them's low, it doesn't matter if 6 out of 7 are full, and then you reduce one down halfway, it starts drawing water from the others. And they say that's an example of what happens with the energy. The water represents energy in each one of our endocrine glands. Any one of them that's low, also leaves people vulnerable to spiritual attack. They say that they all have to be on 100% to have a full clarity of thought. And when that happens, we know that it helps us to open portals to higher realms, basically climb Jacob's ladder. So it helps with our ascension. And with that, anyone can have amazing experiences. Let's go ahead and measure some things before and after to help some of you see what you don't normally see. And I just would like to take at least a few people who has the worst lower back pain or sciatic pain. Come on up. And I just want to measure the top of the hips is the iliac crest that's up in the lower back here and here. We'll see what we can see if we see one higher or lower. And we're going to see everyone's neck and hips will be level when we're done, but I don't have time to measure everyone. Like, I would love to do that. I do that a lot. But if you go ahead and face this way with a camera behind us here, let's get a view. So can I put my hands on your hips? Okay, so here and here are the hip bones. And you can see which one's high or low pretty easy. Can you see that? What do you say? Which one's on the low side? Is it? I'm looking at it a little differently than you are. You know, let's go ahead and have you do this because they're not far enough out for people to know. Go ahead and have a seat. I want to see someone that's out a mile. That's much easier. Someone who's a real basket case. Let's see your bottom of your feet. Just lift your feet up and bring them together. Now I can tell just by looking here and here, it looks like the right side looks a little shorter than the left without even touching. But if I take my thumbs on the bottom of the ankle bones, yeah, right side's just not much. I want to see, did you go to the chiropractor recently? Yeah. And who's next? I want to find somebody who's further off that's more obvious. Come on up. And go ahead and have a seat. When we turn on our endocrine glands, it's going to level everybody up, but maybe I told you too much information about what you can do with other activations that we've had in this space. People are just, let me see what's going on. Your feet look totally aligned, but let's go. And that shows if one neck's tighter than the other, it rolls the hip back on that side. If a hip is tight, if the glutes are tight on one side, it'll pull that hip down if it's tighter on one side than the other. Let's see what you look like. Okay. I'm getting the same kind of thing happening here. I gave you too much information already. You know how fast it is when you think about receiving the other activations, like the one in Temecula even, or the one that we did here. As soon as you have the intention to receive the last one, it's pretty much done. And it was pretty powerful. So let's see what we see. This is an interesting thing. I guess I kind of messed up my demo. Well, look at the hips are straight. Go ahead and have a seat. I kind of let the cat out of the bag a little too early. Even the bottom of the feet are straight. Usually when I walk around to audiences, it's easy to find who's more off. And even when you hold your feet up, that's one thing. The hips can lock the feet. That's why I have you relax your legs, your hips, relax, and then it'll show more what's really happening in the leg. And as soon as I had you do that, they were leveling up on us. But yeah, this is really interesting. So let's do a new one though. Let's go ahead and do a new one. The neck and hips of all of you are all straight, which is, I've never done this before. I've always been able to at least show people some before and after, but I got a little ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and have a little moment of silence though, and we'll do a lot of activating here. Here we go. Okay. Thank you for each of your contributions with that. The time is 8:05 p.m. It's the 16th of November, 2021. We're at the Temple of Clarity in Vista, California. We just created a timestamp, and we sent off a signal to the multiverse. And any time you want to reactivate this, you can go ahead and do that. One of the things that this data file will do is it produces stem cells for every part of the body every day. I've been involved with stem cell technology with the actual scripting of it in the beginning since 1994. I was in a bad wave runner accident. My left knee was basically T-boned between a couple wave runners. Both of them totaled with my knee in between them. Ripped the PCL out of the top insertion. Doctor said it would be impossible to reattach it. Took a piece of bone out with it. And I went ahead and reattached it. I had the attitude, with God, anything is possible. Took my petition straight to source. And I was shown some things. Luckily, I had a great mentor who my father was, and I was shown how to put some two and two together to use some of the basics of the power plant technology, this and that, to help power the word, verbalize the physiology, and create the action. Physiology is functionality. And if you know enough, do enough, you get better and better results the better you get at that. So it's like regenerating faster than you degenerate. If you do enough, then if you regenerate faster than you degenerate, you grow younger. And that's the basic of immortality. Doesn't mean that you can't be killed. Entire planets of immortal beings have been wiped out. Entire planet gone. That's happened if you look at the whole history of not just Earth, but before that. And so it doesn't mean that we can't be killed, even if we reach a level where we're over 1,000 years and still in our prime. It's just regenerating faster than we degenerate. And what all are we doing? Well, we keep learning. We keep getting really big keys at that. And, it's like, I want to relate a paradigm. What's happened with spirituality is people get so excited over one amazingly beautiful principle, like grace, and form a whole religion around it. Like they have the have-all, be-all of all truth. And we want to watch out. As soon as we think we know it all, we stop learning. And how many of them have done that? Think they know it all, have the have-all, be-all. Well, the laws of empowerment really show how to create much more of the gathering of truth. It's a grand integration, the gathering of all the greatest thought leaders, and what we continue to receive from higher realms about just a higher realm level of understanding the laws of nature is what is replacing all existing governments. We've made a declaration before called the Declaration of Independence here in this country, and part of it is to throw off tyranny when it becomes so bad that there's really not another thing to do. And I think there's going to be an international one that will happen, a global one. And it's inevitable because I've already scripted my personal constitution and produced my laws of peace. My title of liberty's been erected, my standard of truth. And in the lineage that I was raised in, each of those phrases is really significant lingo, you could say, language to them, even though I'm not part of that. I'm not a member of that organization. And I got to the point, I think I was a bit much for them, but I think I'm in good company. So even Christ was a bit much for the church in his area. Well, anyway, we have a lot more to share. So there's master keys that have to do with words. Sometimes you can just look and be healed with the right instructions written on a plank, on a piece of paper, or a skin of an animal. Sometimes just verbalizing bless your right and left brain, pineal pituitary thyroid, thymus, heart, and left adrenals, pancreas, and reproductive glands is enough to light people's auras up. And if I would have done 6 out of 7, it wouldn't work the same way. In any order, it wouldn't work the same way. I've proven that over and over again. But when we have enough, it works. And that's been, even the basics of that has been the most powerful healing technology that I've had to work with for a long time as far as seeing healing miracles happen. And one truth doesn't replace another. And there's other miracle prayers out there that all do different things. Each one of them has different keys that can be all integrated, and all that truth lines up perfectly. It's like being able to start with any one principle, put it into action enough, and tell you your faith in it can take a back seat because you know what the fruit is. And in a controlled environment, you know what's going to happen every time. And then it shines a brighter light around it. You become aware of other principles that are also connected to it because everything's interconnected. And you start applying some of those other principles the same way. And you can start anywhere in the circle of life and end up going full circle, no matter where you start. There's so many paths to get people onto empowerment. It's just finding and retaining and keeping your actions in alignment with, if you keep in alignment with the positive side of things, you grow positive. And if it's abusive, you're growing into having more of a slave master or being the slave mentality, one or the other, and there's no fence to sit on. So I recommend you don't do anything manipulative or abusive, that you stay on the light, in the light side of everything, in the love side of everything. 100% doing that, that's where real empowerment is. And control is an illusion. You know, anything that's about control, you can right there just know it's basically the dark side. We, God created us. We created government. They've been selling us out ever since. There's a big history of that. I can talk some more about that before we're done if you like, because that's a whole other branch of our tree of life that deserves to be and is being set straight. And, abuse, one of the things that we know is anytime we enable any abuse in any category of our life, it always gets worse until we learn the lesson from it. We're always learning, for one thing, and the abuse in our lives is really, because we've been figuring it out, it's really struggling. It's making power grabs more and more obvious and more obvious. It's never been so obvious, has it? And that's the nature of that beast. It's unmasking itself. That wolf in sheep's clothing. It's the unmasking, even of mask hypnosis. But so, what about another key? One that I've been involved with now for 5 months, and one that I've been involved with for the past 12 years on a regular daily basis, like religiously. And I want to talk about the big, bad, scary thing that I think is just a bioweapon. There's so much evidence of that, and I can tell you that our body is so amazing. The more we just call it raise your vibration. The more healthy you focus on just being super healthy, your white blood cells and lymphocytes, I was helping, it was brought up before the meeting started. I was helping people in 1993. That was 18 years. Was that longer? No, it was 28 years ago. Right. 28 years ago, I was helping people who had been testing positive with HIV clean up and go right back and test negative when top medical minds were saying that was absolutely impossible to do. And it attacks the lymphocytes, and they're made up of white blood cells. White blood cells, they're like the army of our immune system. And lymphocytes, some of them can divide up into like 9 white blood cells if they find anything that's not supposed to be there and just wipe it right off. In fact, in seconds, cancer cells can just disappear under a microscope when a white blood cell that's healthy and has its life process turned on goes right up to it, and just within seconds, its pieces so small you can't even see it anymore. It's just dissolved. And we know a lot about how that happens now. And I don't have a whole lot of time, but let's just say it also helps explain the autoimmune process and the aging process. And they're supposed to shoot out, they use oxygen like all of our healthy cells as part of the life process. It takes glucose and oxygen to make ATP, and that's pure energy for the cell because it turns on the real engine, the sodium-potassium pump. A lot of people talk about the mitochondria being the engine. That's where the ATP is created. That's basically the fuel injector is what I call it. But the real power, what generates the power for the eyes to see, your heart to beat, in fact, any muscle that contracts or relaxes, it's the sodium-potassium pump, the position that it's in that's responsible for the contraction or relaxing. And in lack of oxygen, guess what? They end up stuck in a contracted position every time. So even every beat of the heart is responsible, the sodium-potassium pump, all of your cells being able to do what they're supposed to. So have you ever heard of terrain theory? In the early 1800s, someone came up with this idea called terrain theory. And right at the same time, right around just a few years or something, somebody else came up with an idea of the germ theory. On his deathbed, the man who came up with the germ theory, he said the germ theory is nothing. The terrain is everything. And one of the things we know is if you're in a healthy environment, those white blood cells and lymphocytes, when they have oxygen, which is the healthy environment, the cells have oxygen. That's just one of the things that we know. The glucose and oxygen is there. The sodium-potassium balance is good. And we know a lot. My father was one of the greatest champions of terrain theory on the planet. I was his top student in that area and everything else that he'd helped pioneer. So I know a little bit about terrain theory and what I'm talking about. Our body can produce its own antibodies on demand with whatever shows up. Doesn't matter. We don't need to take shots to build up antibodies. The fact that most people were surviving what we're dealing with now, a bioweapon even, our body was still negating, neutralizing, and just eradicating it, just dissolving it, as long as we're in a healthy environment, as long as we don't have a terminal inflammation happen too fast, which is the disease environment. In general, the most basic aspect, one of the easiest things for you to know is that that's a positive pressure blowout with excess fluid. And I want to use a single cell of a chicken egg as a little bit of an example. It's a single stem cell surrounded by albumin and water with all the nutrition that that egg needs to grow a whole living organism without any external source of oxygen even. They can't tell the difference between a human stem cell and a white blood cell when they just look at it under a microscope. They look identical. And the white blood cells actually come from the stem cells. Most of our stem cells are in our bone marrow. And when lymphocytes are created in the bone marrow, in the bones, starting with a B, they call it a B cell. When they're created in our thymus gland, they call it a T cell for thymus. That's the information control center for our whole immune system. And it's one of the endocrine glands that we're talking about. That's one of the main energy centers in the body. Even the pineal pituitary, there's these tiny little glands, but they're major power plants with what they do in the body energetically. So the white blood cells and the lymphocytes, which are made up of white blood cells, they're like the Army and the Special Forces and Marines. So what happens is sometimes there's a wolf in sheep's clothing that is a bioweapon that's designed to use our lymphocytes as a host. Literally, the T cells become a host for HIV. What a wolf in sheep's clothing. It uses the lymphocyte to transport itself throughout the body to try and trick the lymphatic system, which is like, think of all the satellites we have on this planet. Think of a future satellite technology that can see inside of every single building where everyone is. And if there's any intruders that don't belong anywhere, it knows about it. Our lymphatic system is that smart. Our white blood cells and lymphocytes can smell any substance, any poison, any toxin, any spike protein, anything they call a virus, anything that's a weapon, any poison. Poisons are poisons because they damage cells. It's really simple. You take most of what you think you know and toss it aside. Poisons are poisons because they damage cells. Damaged cells produce histamine and bradykinin that dilate the capillaries in the blood and outcome the inflammation much faster than the lymphatic vessels can retrieve it. Here's another thing. Everywhere you've got blood vessels, you've got a set of lymphatic vessels going side by side. So if this is a blood capillary, you've got lymphatic capillaries going side by side and even up in between the cells. They're even more extensive, but they're clear fluid, so they're naked to the human eye, unlike the bloodstream. And this is a positive pressure system. Lymphatics are a negative subpressure set of vessels. And how many of you knew everywhere you've got your bloodstream, you've got a whole other circulatory system in your body? How many of you knew that? Raise your hand. My father taught about this in 200 cities a year. 5 to 6 CDs a week, never charging admission, because he knew someone had to get the truth out. 1966 was the International Society of Lymphology. With the help of international military forces, they even went behind the Iron Curtain and gathered all the top medical minds together in the world. Only about 65 of them were from the United States. These are men who were smart enough not to learn it, even though they didn't learn it in medical school either. They were smart enough to figure it out on their own about albumin leaving the bloodstream. The fact that we lose the whole content every 24 hours. That was something that one of their first people, the first meeting they had was in H.S. Merson's home. Hyman Samuel Merson. He'd already published an article in the American Heart Association Journal proving that we don't even have a positive pressure in our bloodstream without the subpressure lymphatic vessels. They're lined with one-way check valves, and they maintain that healthy environment where there's no inflammation. 100% of deaths of COVID, I just said the name, hope we don't get blocked. But there's an actual study on Pubmed proving that regardless of comorbidities, they all have a terminal inflammation around the cells, and they have hypoalbuminemia in the blood. That is shock. When you lose enough albumin, you lose enough of the pressure because most of the blood's water, and the main water magnet is the blood protein. The main one is albumin. It's the smallest one too. 70% of there's 3 different types, and 70% is the smallest, called the albumin. So just think, when it leaves, it can really leave. You lose positive pressure in the blood. The blood vessels collapse if enough leaves, and that is death from shock. Just purely death from shock when that happens. So 100% of these cases have hypoalbuminemia. Terminal inflammation around the cells, but they're not saying it's because the albumin is trapped around the cells. They don't even talk about it leaving the bloodstream, how it leaves and what retrieves it, whole other circulatory system, because people would ask the question, how can I activate that other set of vessels? We're giving you some major keys here to an internal tree of life in your body called the lymphatic system, and everything's interconnected. All healing arts, one way or the other. All life and death is connected to this lymphatic system. They all work because one way or another, they're helping unlock those blood proteins and pull them out and reestablishing that healthy environment of the cells that we're just showing you without any inflammation. That's the healthy environment versus the positive pressure blowout. And if you cover up your thumb, go ahead, just grab onto it so no one can see it. That represents the lymphatic system. You can stay in the medical dark ages forever and never figure out how this works, how it goes from here to here and how to get it back. What creates the problems and how to solve them. You can never figure it out. And so the doctors, they can't talk about it without getting their license taken away, especially what activates those lymphatic vessels. Deep breathing and bouncing internally. The laying on of hands externally, you got, stroking, compressing tissues, massage, and even the light fast stroke, lomi style. Very powerful. Because the lymphatics, you don't have to, it responds with light pressure, but energy is the key. Energy. When the energy comes out, you can take that egg, and it's like taking it into a hard-boiled egg without cooking it. The energy that our cells produce, the sodium-potassium pump produces about 0.7 millivolts. It is enough to measure scientifically, but it's very subtle energy we're talking about. And how many healing arts have to do with energy? When you put that much energy back in, like just turning on our endocrine glands, you unlock those blood proteins. It's like going back, you liquefy it, going back to a fresh egg again from that boiled egg. This is what's happening through our capillary pores also. It doesn't just lock around the cells and make the inside of a tumor hard. By the way, the word tumor from its Latin origin is tumere, which means to swell. You can't have a tumor without swelling. You can't have swelling without trapped albumin. Can't have any itis without trapped albumin. Every itis is inflammation, same thing. So what we're giving you here is absolute gold, taking you out of the medical dark ages, perhaps for the very first time, because this is the basics of the medical dark ages, what they decided to bury in 1966 with the help of international military forces. It hasn't been taught in any college, university, or medical school in the United States ever since. And they can't publish it anymore because in the fine print, even though they're the top medical minds in the world who knew about it, they made it so it technically wasn't a pure medical society. And even though they meet every 2 years in a different country, different part of the world, and all of their presentations are recorded. If there's any doubt whether they're true, they debate it like crazy. They operate just like any other pure medical society. In the fine print, it's not a pure medical society, and they can no longer publish in any medical journal any research that they're involved with that organization because of that. This is how they shut them all up. That's another one of their rules, okay? That's just how they work. If any doctor's participating in an organization that's technically not a pure medical organization, they can no longer publish that research in any of the peer-reviewed journals. And luckily, one of Mearson's students was Dr. Arthur C. Guyton, and he'd already published the medical textbook of physiology that my father was holding up, 200 CDs a year, 5 to 6 CDs a week. And it's been able to continue to be updated. It was already printed, and there's been there's been teams of students that have been continuing to do that, of his work. It's the only one written by a lymphologist. And so my father first met these men in 1967, which is the year after. He didn't meet him in 67. 66 was when they started this organization, when they decided to drop the ball. My father was shown to go back to school with 6 kids, become a doctor, to teach people how to heal themselves in 1967, which was the following year. It's interesting, the timeline of how all this happened. But there's more of that within that zero disease class that I mentioned. So we're giving you some big keys. Let's talk also about the environment, of the healthy environment where there's oxygen, where there's no excess sodium because there's no trapped albumin. That's the sodium magnet. It's also a major magnet for, it's the main carrier for the drugs. That's in the Merck manual. And does that give them their motive to shut it up, on not tell anybody how they leave the bloodstream and get trapped? Because all the chemical drugs out there, they're just different chemicals that have different attractions to different parts of the body. It's just how chemistry works. And they'll cause trapped albumin in the parts of the body they're attracted to. If you know why drugs kill, can you give them any more? Is that a motive for a $1.3 trillion industry yearly, globally? 1% of that's 13 billion a year, you guys, just to give you an idea of how big 1.3 trillion is. And most people can't really conceive of how big 13 billion is. But it's a big monster. And they've actually funded a lot of politicians' pockets. They've been padding the pockets of politicians for a long time. You know who the first NGO was? Rockefeller Foundation. Did you know that WHO is just another one of their sister NGOs? They're supposed to be non-governmental organizations. How did they take over the world? Well, there's a how. There is a whole history of how. In China, they wrote a book called To Change China, and it's about Rockefeller's influence just in China and how they've attacked Oriental medicine, try to replace it with Western medicine. And they probably laugh when books like that come out because why? It's just about China. It's not how they did it globally. Have you ever heard of Standard Oil Trust? The very first trust. We just mentioned the first NGO and the first trust in the United States. And the first antitrust laws were passed to tear it apart. It took several presidents of the United States to do that. Rockefeller Foundation was born out of that to protect their petrochemical interests in their investment they dumped all their money into. So, but they'd use brute mob tactics to take over everything connected to the oil industry, from barrels to railroads, you name it. They were breaking legs, literally, in the process. And it was created to do something that would normally be illegal, to create a monopoly. Then they broke them up into the 7 sisters, so we have 7 monsters to deal with instead of 1, and in the process they came up with Rockefeller Foundation. But there's so much good that they've done in the world. They're humanitarians. And the mainstream media is it's their publicity. It's their publicist. Their, publicity firm. Publicist firms. Yeah, what? Puppets. Well, there's a history of that, and there's a way to reverse that. A lot of people are scared. They hear that when people become genetically modified, it's like a plant, like Monsanto. They've got GMO foods they've created, that they own the plant, even if it blows its wind onto another farmer's crop, and they sue the farmer for their whole farm. They've been doing that for a long time. They've been taking over the whole farming industry. And how do we know they just didn't dust it, have an airplane fly over and dump some of their seeds? Anyway, what they don't want you to know is after about 7 generations, they go back to heirloom because they didn't change the spiritual blueprint. And things are created on a spiritual level and in an intelligence level before they're manifested physically. What does that mean that we can do with what they're trying to do in modifying the human genome? Well, I think the same principles apply. That doesn't mean I'm going to line up and get a lethal injection, what I consider, by a bioweapon. I'm not going to do that, but what I'm saying though is there's a lot of things that have come out that are saying that they're helping with that. It's because the principles that they're all tied into are core principles that they're working through in order to create that. And I hope that you're starting to see what some of those core principles are really here, and it'll give you a lot of hope because there's a lot of ways that can be done. And let's go back to the white blood cell. It doesn't just shoot out the byproduct of oxygen when it accelerates its life process, when it finds any poison, whether it's a spike protein or anything. The byproduct of that life process, it shoots out like a laser gun. It's a main free radical from oxygen. And I'd rather call it like disintegrated oxygen, but because when it loses an electron, it's disintegrated. 1 electron, it becomes the free radical superoxide is what it's called in the scientific community. It's oxygen missing an electron. I like to use as many lay term to explain it as I can. There's another gun that's after it kills the bad guys completely, very quickly, damages cells many times per second. Each one of those does. Every single molecule of superoxide. So the other gun shoots out an enzyme that's supposed to reintegrate 1,000,000 of those per second back to oxygen. I'd like to call that enzyme oxygen reintegration enzyme to just simplify it. And catalase I'd like to call hydrogen reintegration enzyme because it does the same thing with hydrogen peroxide back to hydrogen. At least sounds like hydrogen peroxide. And some of those free radicals will, but there's all these crazy names. There's so many names to learn. So it's like they made it as hard as possible for people to figure out how things work. And I'd just rather rename most all of it with more lay terms, really. We don't all speak Latin. But so SOD, superoxide dismutase, was the first one ever discovered. It was discovered by a guy named Dr. Joseph Milton McCord. Joe McCord, for short. He is the last Elliott Cresson Gold Medal recipient, published the first paper on oxidative stress in history with the discovery of this SOD, superoxide dismutase, which I'd just rather call oxygen reintegration enzyme or something because of what it does. 1,000,000 per second back to oxygen. Now that, I think, is the most powerful oxygen therapy on the planet. Problem is, after the age of 20, the master key that regulates the production of that breaks more and more. It shuts off more and more until we die. And so if our white blood cells are shooting out the superoxide to kill the bad guys and the other gun's broken, after they're done killing the bad guys, guess what? They damage our healthy tissue in the surrounding areas many times. They just don't stop. And that's friendly fire. That is autoimmune. Hashimoto's is autoimmune when it happens. It's celiac when it's in the gut. It's rheumatoid arthritis when it happens in the knees. But now you know the mechanism. If we could reverse that mechanism, could we reverse that disease? Like if we could get those white blood cells and lymphocytes to be able to crank out the SOD again, and catalase for hydrogen peroxide and glutathione, there's about 30 different super antioxidant enzymes like that we are born producing that start shutting off where we don't produce as much, more and more after the age of 20. It happens until we die, and sometimes earlier. Cancer is the #1 cause of death for children. And this master key that regulates all 30 super antioxidant enzymes also regulates all the genes associated with every type of cancer. There's 28 of them strongly associated with colon cancer, and only one of them has a drug designed to target it. I'm going to pause here for a minute. I want you to think about this. All the drugs of the past, they operate on a 1-to-1 ratio, drug to gene. This is one of the reasons why we had the Human Genome Project to begin with, that President Clinton started to map out the human genome because of how the drugs have worked, targeting one gene at a time out of well over 3,000, okay? Just to be objective with you. So, the 1 out of 28, those 28 genes, if our master key regulated that's less than 1% of what that master key really does. If it regulates all 30 super antioxidant enzymes, that's less than 1% of what that master key regulates that we're born producing. And sometimes, we find out that stress shuts it off. Sounds like we need to get rid of some 3-letter organizations to me if stress shuts it off. There's all kinds of ways they're killing people. And stress, so stress is one of the things that causes more oxidative stress, and oxidative stress itself shuts it off. Degeneration. Yeah, you're talking about these free radicals damage the cells many times per second. Even our DNA gets damaged. Everything that makes the cell a cell, every part of it is getting damaged. It's like the rusting of an engine, it's been described as. So there's that aspect. They look at biochemically the oxidative stress a lot. And in the beginning, they thought maybe vitamin C and E were okay to target it with. Well, they're not meant to get involved with that fight. They do other things, and when they do what they're supposed to, there's a lot of health benefits. But when they get in a fight with a free radical, they themselves become a free radical. And so it hasn't actually lowered the oxidative stress levels at all. That actually was published and proven. And I've got another gift for you if you can remember it, and if you can't, come to me, because you have to have the extension in order to get it. There's something called the NRF2 Activist Science Presentation. It's another 2 hours, and I have it all separated. It's on the front page of maskhypnosis.com, but there's a lot of other, well, political information on that page, put it that way. But the whole front page is really dedicated to the NRF2 Activist Science Presentation. There's another website, highspeedrelief.com, that doesn't have any links anywhere, no contact information even to find me. Then if you go /NRF2, then it's just the NRF2 Activist Science Presentation. You'll find simple things like fasting activates NRF2. There's ingredients in broccoli and cauliflower like sulforaphane, and there's 6 times more sulforaphane in broccoli sprouts than regular broccoli. There's things in our diet that are NRF2 activators. Ginger, rosemary. And really the best formulator that I've been able to find is Dr. Joe McCord. He got in, he didn't just discover SOD 55 years ago. He's still working in laboratory still today, and he's rubbing shoulders with all the top medical schools around, publishing peer reviews still today. So he's specialized in this specialty. Don't expect them to know everything about science and the immune system. Still, I consider him to be a genius in his area of expertise, and doesn't mean he's perfect. Doesn't mean we should form a whole religion around him and start worshiping him. Even if someone figured out how to regrow arms, God bless them, doesn't mean that we should form a whole religion around him. I just hope you understand I would respect the principles and respect any master. I have a great deal of respect for people who have learned how to master certain principles. I think there's a lot we can learn from that. But each one of them, they're just in their own, it's just one part of our lives. And we're all here meant to get all of it right. So we're meant to become more and more integrated. More and more as we become more on our path of positive learning and growth, we become more interfaith. It's just a natural part of our growth here. And so you've got this master key called NRF2, NRF2, that we're born producing. And I still think Dr. Joe McCord is, what he's done for me is, one of the things is all the biochemistry. There's no biochemist I know that has all the biochemistry that we've discovered between their ears. Who knows it all? And the same is true with what's gone on with the Human Genome Project and discovering all the genes, let alone what all the gene products do, which are all different proteins that do different things. So you can consider that master key that regulates all the survival genes, all the disease mechanism genes. During the course of the Human Genome Project, we found a master key that we're born producing that regulates all of them. They probably thought that would never happen. They were looking at creating drugs to continue to produce drugs that target one gene at a time, and they're still doing that. Out of over 3,000. And they created a $1.3 trillion monster based on a 1-to-1 drug-to-gene ratio. I hope you're starting to get the picture of what ingenuity. Dr. McCord gave this computer database that compiles all the largest computer databases out there. SwissProt is a protein database in Switzerland. All these gene products that have been discovered, genes and their gene products, they gathered it. It's one of the major databases out there. GenBank is another one. There's a big database that some of you may have heard of called Pubmed, the National Library of Medicine that the National Institutes of Health put together. Anything published in any medical journal is in that database. But there's a database of databases that's been created, and it's ingenious how it gathers all of it together. And it's a gene database that also has all the data in all the medical journals ever published, because it compiles everything in Pubmed it knows about, and it's called Ingenuity. It's based out of Japan, and they've actually been showing what all that science has finally come full circle to and pointed to very strongly. The first person to give that a voice was Dr. Joe McCord, but he was pulling punches. He's rubbing shoulders with top medical minds. How could he just come out and say what's going to wipe out the entire pharmaceutical market? So I'm the one who's decided, hey, I'm going to start something called the Nerf 2 activist movement, and let's really give them a much stronger voice without, maintain love and understanding. In fact, guess who deserves a lot of credit for creating a lot of that science? The pharmaceutical market. And there's pros and cons of everything in our life. There's strengths and weaknesses of everything. We're meant to build more and more of our lives based on the strengths and have less and less of the duality. That's being shaken out of our lives right now. That's what we're being shown how exactly to do that. And if we're not willing to face the biggest issues, then we can be chasing our tails. So there's a big master key that activates the whole branch of our tree of life that is our survival genes, our disease mechanism genes. It takes an 80-year-old back to that of a child as far as oxidative stress when they do the blood test before and after and measure lipid peroxidation, which are what gets damaged the fastest and easiest, yet they recover very quickly. So they're the best endpoint to measure what's happening in any given moment in your body. And even an 80-year-old goes back to that of a child in 30 days, and that's not happened ever before. Vitamin C and E, we're increasing it, and they do increase it without Nerf 2 activation, but with Nerf 2 activation, they don't get in the fight. Everyone goes back to that of a child within 30 days, regardless, as long as they're on Nerf 2 activation. They can take the vitamins and let the vitamins do what they're good at doing, what they're supposed to do. They don't have to get in a fight with the free radicals. They don't become a free radical themselves. They don't join the opposite side of the team. We're trying to fight, So then anyway, this is, not saying vitamin C is bad. If you got that message, you didn't understand what I said here tonight. It's a good thing. I love it. Take 1,000%, daily dose. I don't mind taking 1,000% of the daily dose here and there. If you take too much, you'll get diarrhea. You can't, then you can taper off, and the more you're on that, the more your body will just adapt. But there's another master key that I want to talk about. And before I get into this other one, I want to mention fear. Fear, we know that laughter can create some of the most powerful immune chemicals that our body can produce. Fear is like the opposite. Your body when you're under stress of any kind, the more stress you're under, the more the body produces something called cortisol. And cortisol, it blocks HGH and everything connected to it. How many of you have heard of human growth hormone, HGH? Raise your hand. I think it's the most powerful substance that our body can produce for regeneration. People just jump up and down about HGH and what it can do for them in regenerating people's bodies. All kinds of miracles have happened with people. And it's produced in the pituitary gland, but usually after the age of 22, I mentioned Nerf 2 shutting off after about 22, HGH starts shutting off about the same time, and it tapers off to about nothing until we die. By the time people hit their mid-40s or so, it's kind of bottoming out. So we have also cracked the code for our hormone production, and it's not just HGH. And guess what that is? Guess what the master key is for our hormone production? Because I tell you what, when we produce cortisol, If someone has someone has a strong enough head injury, it can create enough cortisol to block HGH forever in some people. They can do 1 or 2 light tasks around the house and be wiped out for the rest of the day. They can be disabled for the rest of their life. And I've seen some of the same people, when they activate the right principle to produce enough HGH, reverse domino that whole situation. Like all of a sudden they have their life back. One other thing I want to say right here is a lot of people are in their wrong mind with what's been happening. And I was warning people about it right in the very beginning of what I call the fear pandemic. I was warning people about how, fear can bring people down faster than anything. Most of the soldiers in war have hypoalbuminemia. They die of shock from the thought process, and most of the wounds are non-lethal. But when they see blood leaving their body, if they get shot, even if it's a non-lethal wound, their thought process is, oh, I can't believe I see my life force leaving my body. I'm going to die now. I can't believe I just got shot. I'm going to die. And that dilates capillaries all of a sudden throughout the system. And it can bring so much of that fluid out of the blood that as soon as you lose the positive pressure, vessels collapse, leaving you dead on the spot. That's hypoalbuminemia, the technical term for shock. And it can really, this is also connected with cortisol production and shutting off HGH. We're talking about everything is interconnected. Now I want to talk about the anti-inflammatory abilities of the hormones. There's a doctor in Texas that hasn't lost one person to what's going on over the past, since the thing started in 2020. Not one person. He uses a hormone therapy that they use for asthma. That one hormone, so powerful, anti-inflammatory, keeps the lungs clear and enough inflammation out of the body. He hasn't lost one person. He was instantly under review with one complaint. You show me where to make such a complaint on doctors, because there's plenty of them who deserve it right now. And this doctor could not, Robert Bennett, is that his name? He could not face his accuser. There's a place that people can go. The medical boards have it. I don't know where it is. Otherwise, I encourage all of you to find it, though, and use it the right way. I think there's too many people with deep pockets who pay trolls just to go after good people. The system is built, even George Soros says, change the system and I'll change. He blames it on the system. And like there isn't anything illegal that he's been doing. It's all good and legal. And he calls it amoral behavior, but there's no such thing. It's really only moral and immoral. There's no fence to sit on. It's just part of how we develop. And no one thinks they're a bad person, even if they're Ted Bundy. Or his mother. They didn't think he was a bad person either. Just a good little boy. But anyway, I want to come back to the master key for our hormones that can help reverse domino and give people their right brain, because with cortisol and HGH levels down and really throwing off our biochemistry, people are more into the reptilian brain, fight or flight, survival, which is all fear-based, even more, making their decisions based on fear. What can help really give them their reasoning center back? Well, there's a lot to that, and one of them is reestablishing the chemistry the way it's supposed to. A lot of it has to do with our hormones. If you take a prenatal chart, every developmental phase that a baby goes through there, it's our endocrine glands that are responsible for creating all of those processes, all those tissues. So there are factors that create the whole skeletal system that are called skeletal factors. And when you activate the master key for that whole branch of our tree of life that produces the fruits we call hormones, we increase those skeletal factors. And with women, it doesn't take long after menopause where they start getting osteoporosis more and more. That's low bone density. Well, you increase those skeletal factors, it increases bone density, which wipes out osteoporosis just really fast. There are factors that are vascular factors that help create the whole vascular system in the body. And with varicose veins that are deformed in their structure, when you increase those vascular factors again, it restructures them to their healthy structure again. There's peer-reviewed study on that. With the technology that I use, that I do my best to use every single day, I used it earlier today, to activate what we now know as the master key for our hormones. Anybody here know what that is? Man, you guys are all learning a lot tonight. Giving you some master keys here. Well, that's another hormone. There's a master key for that too. And men, you know, one of the normal signs of healthy virility for a healthy man is the nightly wood. That's just another way to measure where you're at. And I haven't seen anything change that give men back that stronger, faster, and easier than what I've gotten involved with the past 5 months. It's how long I've been involved with it, and I've seen all kinds of transformations happening in people's lives physically, faster than I've ever seen anything, regeneration happening, and across the board for rehabilitation of whatever injuries and things need to be regenerated. But there's some simple keys with this, and everything's interconnected. There's a lot of things that we keep getting, but the key is muscle failure. You have to have slow twitch failure to get fast twitch activity, which is really where the fuel for that is glycogen, and it's where a grandmother can lift up a car with a baby under it. Glycogen. It's made up of a ton of ATP when it's released, so that's a bunch of pure energy that the body has right away. And with the strongman events where they lift 1,000 pounds and walk with it, they go straight to, they go to slow twitch failure, fast twitch activity right now. They get a glycogen release right now. Now, a lot of people get injured trying to do that. I haven't seen never in my lifetime has so many people supersize themselves or in some other way out of shape, mentally, emotionally, physically. It's all interconnected. Then they need a big overhaul. They need a big biochemical wake up. And they need a way to do it fast and easy with light activity where there's no risk of injury. And we've cracked the code. So that technology on that actually started 60 years ago in Japan. 40 years ago, they were publishing what it does for diabetes and stabilizing blood sugar levels, which is all endocrine gland related. If you have a Fitbit on and you've had a problem getting deep sleep, I know someone who's had a major problem getting deep sleep, only a minute and a half to 2 minutes a night of deep sleep, which is where most of the regeneration's happening. Within one session, within a 3-minute to 5-minute session, she had an hour and a half of deep sleep that very night. With a light activity, 3 to 5 minutes, with no heavy weight, no high impact. In fact, she's pretty frail. So she was really on the light side of what's called BFR technology. You know what that stands for? It stands for blood flow resistance, and as soon as I heard that, I was running for the door. It's like the law of lift that defies the law of gravity, without which you wouldn't see any airplanes flying around. They call it BFR, blood flow resistance training, but it actually increases circulation, because as soon as you go to slow twitch failure, there's a multiple air chamber design also that's new, that's only been out for a couple years. Right before lockdowns happened, it came out, and then they tried to launch, they decided to just hold off, develop a bunch of, while lockdowns were happening, they're developing a bunch of resource material, a ton of resource material that is all available now. So there's a new multi-air chamber design, because everybody's been using basic tourniquets. And we don't want to block blood flow because there's danger. When you start increasing arterial pressure, you can start sending a back pressure to the heart. And the multi-air chamber design is the only patented design out of all of them, and it's the only one that's proven not to increase arterial pressure, not to send a back pressure to the heart. It's more comfortable. It doesn't cut into the skin like some of the other designs that are really painful. Some of them have left bodybuilders with a ring around their arm. Inmates in prison, tell you what, it's a matter of survival. When they look at a bunch of guys that are huge, and they know that it's like, what are they going to do to defend themselves? How can they achieve a transformation? Well, I called my brother 5 months ago when I was first introduced to this. My little brother, he said, guess what? I learned about that while I was a prison guard from the inmates. who are the ones that were getting really big and fast, really ripped really fast, who are having the fastest physical transformations, transforming their bodies. And they're using basic tourniquets, sometimes even their hand. And they got an artery under here. They got a, well, I'm glad I never had to go that route because I don't want to cause any stress on myself or cause any problems for people. We finally solved the safety issues with the new design. But anyway, this is what the KC Chiefs trainer, which is the premier trainer for the whole NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs trainer, he's getting as many of his players on it as he can. So NFL players are now trading a set of 90s for a set of 5-pound dumbbells and still going to failure, the great big guys with a 5-pound dumbbell. Well, it's now 9 o'clock. If you have any questions about anything that you've heard tonight, how do I say that they can contact me?
Email, phone number. You know that Doug wants to buy that nutritional supplement you have, whatever that is.
Well, you can contact me about that. I haven't mentioned a name on purpose. Please don't have me do that here. I haven't mentioned names of any products on purpose. Contact me later and we'll have a private conversation about that. But to contact me, all my contact information is available from ZeroDisease.com, all spelled out, ZeroDisease.com. So with that, I'm happy to do demos for people wherever I am. I'm doing a lot of them in Southern California, Las Vegas, up into Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and so we can do free demos while I'm in town if you'd like to do that tomorrow morning or tonight, whatever we have time for. So anyway, I'm going to be in California until the 21st. Have another little thing that's happening in Irvine on the 21st, and then I'll be gone for a little while, but I'm always coming back. I've been spending a lot of time here the past, I would say, especially the past 10 years. So it's one of my favorite places to come and visit. Well, with that, I just want to say thank you for your time. Congratulations. You've got a few more keys to major keys to entire branches of your tree of life that you didn't know even existed before. And congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Az. So
okay,
you can ask him questions afterwards. We're just going to get off the live stream, and then you can talk freely about whatever you want to do. It won't be broadcast.
Perfect. And
YouTube won't shut you down.
There's a disclaimer. It's for educational purposes only, not intended for diagnosis, treatment, or anything that would normally require a license. But there's no license required to teach.
Look, there's some doctors in the room here. You'll probably get a lot of questions later on.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this broadcast. We're going to be live streaming again tomorrow for the Divine Mother Worship Service. And tune into that. And with that said, I know Doug is online. He's waiting for me to give you some money to get that product. All right. Good night, everybody.